Have you ever wondered why certain things just come really easy to certain people and whereas they take you a lot of motivation and energy to perform? For example, I used to see guys who were very consistent to the gym. They would just show up with their bags all year round whenever they wanted to, no problem. And then there were guys who were excellent at work, excellent at studies, always got good grades, had all their assignments complete. They were consistently performing to an exceptional level, and I always thought to myself, how were these people able to do these things effortlessly? Whereas I had to show discipline, motivation, commitment, and sacrifice a virgin to Satan to get these things done. This is when I learned about two powerful concepts that forever changed my life. The very first concept is the concept of activation energy. You see, every task that you do has some sort of activation energy associated with that task. This is the amount of energy required to simply begin that task. If the activation energy required to do a task is quite high, then you're going to require a lot of motivation to do that task. And you probably won't have this motivation all the time, so you're more likely to never start that task. Whereas if the activation energy required for a task is low, then you don't require motivation at all. You are much more likely to do that task. So in the past, I tried to optimize for raw motivation. Hey, if I have unlimited motivation, I can just cross over this activation energy barrier of any activity and do it. But turns out that motivation is a fairly limited resource and it is bound to run out. So it was logical for me to not try to optimize for motivation, but try to reduce the activation energy of tasks that I perform. And this brings me to the second concept of identity. You see, all these people who are able to perform these behaviors quite easily, effortlessly, were able to do so because these things were part of their identity. When something is part of your identity, then the activation energy required to do that thing is fairly low. And this is why you're just able to do it without any sort of motivation at all. So this begs the question, how do you make something part of your identity? Think of identities in terms of voting boxes. There are thousands and thousands of possible identities. You could have the identity of someone who trains, you could have the identity of someone who reads, you could have the identity of someone who has great social skills, someone who eats healthy, etc. etc. There are a bunch of possible identities. So each time you do a particular behavior that supports a particular identity, that's like casting a vote in favor of that identity. For example, each time you go to the gym or each time you work out, you cast a vote in favor of the identity of a person who trains. You are making that identity stronger. And once you cast enough votes, that thing becomes part of your identity. So the next time you go to the gym, it's going to be much easier because you have the identity of someone who trains. This is going to come naturally to you. Your body just thinks that, oh, this is what I do all the time. Make it effortless, lower the activation energy. This is exactly why someone who has been training for the past 10 years can easily hit the next workout session. He doesn't even have to think about it. All he has to do is carry his bag, boom, in the gym, pump out the reps, and he's done. Similarly, someone who has read 1,000 books doesn't have to think much about reading. He just has to pick up a book and start reading. The activation energy of the tasks is so low and this behavior becomes so automated when things become part of your identity. Whereas someone who has never lifted weights or someone who has never read a book is going to have a hard time doing any of these activities because this behavior is so foreign to them. The activation energy is so high that they simply don't even attempt. They simply don't even bother doing it. If you're interested in watching more of these raw, low dopamine videos where we value information over entertainment, then consider subscribing to us to see us more often. And this concept of identity is not some wishy-washy pseudoscience. Your brain literally has the ability to rewire itself based on the external stimulus that it receives. This is called neuroplasticity. A person who plays football for 100 days in a row eventually gets better at football. That's because his brain has now rewired itself to optimize for football. He doesn't have to think much about kicking the ball or receiving the ball or heading the ball because your brain just automates that behavior. It's used to it. It's optimized for it. You can say that football has now become part of his identity, so he doesn't have to spend all that much energy into playing football. So once I understood these principles of identity, neuroplasticity, and activation energy, then I changed the way that I started doing things. So initially, when I picked up a new activity, my goal was to just do it all the time and progress extremely hard, increase the intensity. If I was going to the gym, then I would go to the gym for 60 minutes, go do a really intense workout for the next 4 or 5 days. But then I would eventually just give up because I didn't have the motivation to continue it and then I was too burnt out, etc. etc. But now my focus has been on just showing up to this new activity my focus has been on consistency. And you can only achieve consistency in the initial stages when the intensity is fairly low. So instead of doing a 60-minute workout, I started with just going to the gym for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes at max. Just doing a few reps, a few sets, having a fun time and coming back. Each gym session was just about casting votes in favor of that particular identity. And even on days when I really did not feel like going to the gym, I still just showed up, like walked a bit, stretched a bit, enjoyed the air conditioning, and then went back home. I didn't even work out, but this way I was still able to cast votes in favor of that identity and still be consistent at that behavior. And what this does is it makes all your future gym sessions, all your future training sessions much easier to perform, because this behavior is actually rewiring your brain. It's being embedded in it. It's making it part of your identity. So if you truly want to make long-lasting habits, forget about the intensity during the initial stages, at least for like a couple of weeks or months when you start a new activity. Completely forget about progress, completely forget about the numbers, completely forget about intensity. Your entire focus just should be to show up for that particular activity and make it part of your identity. Vote casting, even on days when you don't feel like it, reduce the intensity of that activity severely, but still show up. Consistency over intensity during the initial stages. Of course, once this thing becomes part of your identity, then you can increase the intensity because you are not going to give up that behavior. It comes naturally to you. If you're an ambitious person and would really like to achieve great things in life, but procrastination and bad habits are just weighing you down, then make sure that you click on the link in the description and book a free one-on-one call with me. Perhaps we can help you with that.